reason to do this again. Yeah? You can ignore the guy in the background. It's my colleague. Hi, NC.
Hi.
I'll say hi to you. Yeah, students from Nepal. One day he can do a workshop too. Okay, so I think the easiest way to do this is for you to ask me some questions and then I will talk about it. Pradeep said that today's session is focused more on case building, right? How to construct a case. So should I talk about that part first and then we can get to some question and answers, or you want to ask some questions? Yeah.
Case building first.
Case building first. Okay. All right. Good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So silence my phone. All right. So with case building, the first part of case building is the motion analysis, right? Understanding what the motion is asking you to do. So what is this debate about? What is the context of the debate? And so on and so forth. Okay. So that's the first question. If you can build a good case, but for the wrong motion, then it's not really a good case. Okay. So the first part of case building is understanding the topic. And with understanding the topic, I think there's a few things you need to do. A lot of the times when debaters do definitions, you define the specific words of the motion. I don't think that's really the thing you need to focus on that much, unless there is a subjective word. And by subjective word, I mean something that asks you to measure most of the time, right? So a word like better than, a word like prioritize, then those words require you to provide some kind of standard. Okay, so then you need to explain what that word is. Otherwise, you don't really need to define all the words in the motion. Okay, so the important thing you need to ask with the motion is, I think, what is this debate about, right? Who does this debate affect, and why is this debate important? Okay, and then ask what is it that I want to do in this debate. So what am I going to do, and then what am I not going to do, right? And then provide some examples. Okay, so that's just the first part in the topic analysis and the definition. Okay, making sure people understand what exactly the debate is about, right? And that's part of your case construction. We'll do this with an example, perhaps later. I think that will make stuff a little bit clearer. Okay, so the first part, define the topic, explain to people what the topic's about, and then the second thing is, well, building your case. Your case is basically just a collection of ideas and arguments to support your motion, right? And with your case, I think there are largely two parts to your case. One is the setup, so things you need for that case to happen, right? Things that your case relies on. So your model, parameters. If you have a policy, what is your policy? Those are the things that your case relies on. And then the second part are your arguments, right? So what are the arguments that supports your case? And that argument stuff connects to the model or whatever else you need. That's basically your case construction. Okay, so I'm going to try to map this out a little bit. Okay, I'm going to write some stuff. I do it much better if there's like a whiteboard. Okay, so those are the three steps largely, right? So the first
Read
one.
it out for them.
Hmm?
It's define topic, setup, and arguments. 1, 2, 3. Define topic, setup, and arguments.
Yeah. It's a virtual classroom. Although I feel like I'm lying down on the floor looking at you guys, which is a good way to do a lecture, I think. The next time I'm in Nepal, I'm going to lie down on the floor and do lectures. Okay, so let's try to do this step by step, right? So the first one is to define the topic. Let's give an example topic. something straightforward. Okay, so let's say the topic is that the environment is more important than the economy. Have you guys done this debate before?
Not in this one.
Okay. So let's say that's the topic, right? The environment is more important than the economy. So what is this debate about? It's not a rhetorical question. What is this debate about? You can just say some stuff, whether I hear it or I don't hear it, doesn't really matter. Debate about the environment. Yeah, usually.
Yeah.
What else is this debate about? What is this debate trying to do?
I think it's saying like, should we focus more on building the economy or like helping the environment?
Yeah, yeah. So where should you focus more, right? On building the economy or building the environment? So it's a debate about balance or about choices. All debates are about choices, but different types of choices, right? So is this debate proposing something specific? Is it asking you to do something? To ban something, to build something, to propose something? Do you need to do that in this debate?
No.
No, yeah, no, probably not. You don't, right? Because what the choice, this debate is asking you to compare two things and say why one thing is more important than the other thing. But this debate isn't really asking you to do something specific. So if a debate was like, this house would, ban smoking in all government buildings, then that debate is proposing a very specific policy. Okay, so this is not a debate about a policy. This is a debate about comparing two things, right? Comparing the environment and the economy. So, what are things that we need to define here?
Economy and environment.
Okay, good. So, how can we define the economy and the environment?
To develop economy, we need the natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
To create some, to even construct buildings, we need to utilize natural resources.
Mm-hmm.
So increasing the economic aspect decreases the environmental aspect too.
Okay, all right. So I think what you did is you provided a nice context, a comparison, right? So you said in order to develop, we need to use the economy. In order to develop, we need to use the environment. We need to use these resources in order to develop, and you can continue these things. That other different kinds of development requires other forms of the environment, right, and so on and so forth. So, but that's a very kind of broad thing. So you're not limiting it to any kind of specific industry or specific aspect of the environment. Okay, so that's fine. What other word do you need to kind of define in this debate? Let me put it another way, right? So the team that wins this debate needs to do what? Is the team that shows what?
The aspect that they support, either it be economically or either it be environmentally, they show that the benefits one outweighs the other.
Okay, benefits to who?
The one side.
Yeah, but benefits outweigh the other, right? So you said, so who benefits? How do we decide which one to choose?
Benefit to people.
Benefit to people. Okay, so benefit to people, benefit to society, benefit to a certain group, or to which group, to children, to something, and deciding how do you measure those benefits. Okay, so I don't think you guys can see this anyway, but I like to use some kind of visuals. So that's your motion. That's your motion, right? What we're doing now is just trying to understand the motion. Because if you don't understand the motion, then you can't build a case. Okay, so you asked start what the debate was about. So it's about the balance between the environment and the economy, right? Are there any specific words you need to explain? maybe the economy, maybe the environment, but people generally kind of understand largely those words. We said what the debate is not about. Okay, and I think this is quite important too. It's a good way to help people understand what something is to tell them what it's not, right? Because you want to avoid confusion. So you tell them, look, this is not about something specific. This is not about this, not about that. This is about this, right? And often it helps if you can give them an example. So, for example, we have this choice whether or not we need to build this dam, and we think we should build this dam, or we think we don't need to build this dam, right? We think we can continue, we can move on and do something else without this dam, right? So, give people an example. And then, lastly, what exactly, how exactly are you determine who wins or loses the debate, right? So it's the side that shows that what their side benefits the people more, right, or benefits a target more, because that's what you're going to end up arguing towards the end of the debate, right? The first speaker, second speaker, or the whip speakers, or whoever else will say, today we are the ones who want to help the people more. We are the ones who will show that the long-term future of Nepal will be sustainable and guaranteed. We are the ones who prioritize development, blah, 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 right? So that's what your motion is trying to do. Your motion or your case will be trying to do, show why you have more benefits than the other side, right? And the other side will show why they have more benefits than you. But it's always important. The tricky part is measuring these benefits. And why are your benefits more important than the other side? Or why is your philosophy to development more important than the other side? Okay, and then you will show different standards. So one of you is thinking in the short term, you need to be quick and you need to be fast. So you need to prioritize these things. The other side maybe is thinking long term, right? I need to think about our future and to be sustainable and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's just understanding the motion. Okay, so what is your case going to do? And this is important because if you don't understand what your case is going to do, then it's hard for you to evaluate whether you have a successful case or not successful case. Do you guys have any questions about this at this point? No? Okay, so then we do step 2, which is the setup. So our motion, we want to build a case. Let's assume we're in government. We want to build a case that's comparing the environment and the economy, that tries to show that there's more benefits for the people. Do we need to explain anything, give a background or a context? What would help people understand our case more? What would help people believe our side more, right? Is there anything we need to tell people? We don't need a policy because we've agreed we're not proposing anything specific, so we don't need a model. We don't need a step-by-step plan. So, would it help to tell people about a background? To give them a background story? To say like, to explain why this debate is important. Why are we asking this question now? Maybe. Maybe not.
Just a second.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Logan, you were saying.
Hello?
Logan, you were saying I guess we missed something.
Sorry, you just what?
I guess we missed something. You were saying.
Okay, all right. So before we build our arguments, the second part of the case construction is the setup. Okay, so setup is just like you're setting up something. So I'm going to set up a stage. It's my preparation for my case. So before I start talking about the environment or the economy, is there anything that would help my case, right? So if I should I give people a background? Do I need to tell people why this debate is important? If you're going to persuade someone that they should prioritize environmental protection over economic development, what type of frame of mind, or what do you think those people need to know?
We can talk about the current situation of the environment and how it is, and economy as well.
Yes, yeah, sure. I think that would help, right? So you talk about how maybe the environment's very fragile, the environment needs protection. What is the status quo? Where are we right now? So some of these things can be included in your setup. Yeah, it's not really an argument. You're not arguing things. So to people, an argument tries to move someone from one point to another point, right? An argument is proactive. An argument is, well, persuasive. In a setup or description, you're giving them facts. You're telling them this is where things are, right? So let's observe around us. These are the background. These are things that are happening, blah, blah, blah. So this is what we need to do in our setup. So this debate doesn't require a model. In some other debates, you may require a model. And then in those debates, you need to include that in your setup, okay? Last but not least, here then we get to our arguments in our case construction. Yeah, this is the fun part about building a case. So you come up with as many arguments as you can. Okay, so I don't know. Let's say an argument is if I'm defending the environment, I think it's we need to think long term of sustainability. What else? What are some other arguments? That it's more beneficial to people. That we are dependent on the environment. Okay, so you generate as many arguments as you can, right, in your case construction, and then you prioritize your arguments. Okay, so step one is generate arguments, as many arguments as you can. Step two is we prioritize them, right? So what do we prioritize them by? Based on what we want to achieve, right? So we said earlier here, this is what the debate is about. So if this debate is about showing this, then which of these arguments best show that, right? So this argument does it the best. I'm going to do this first, and then I'm going to do this argument, and then I'm going to do this argument, right? And then I develop them so that it fits together in my case. That's basically case construction. You build a case around things that you want to prove, and that's the structure of case construction. The more interesting part is what kind of cases do you build for different kinds of issues, right? Yeah, so if this debate is about showing how my policy can change people, then how do I build a case to show that, right? If this policy is about showing something else, how do I build a case to do that? After you do this for a while, you realize that there are different kind of trends, right, in different kinds of cases or topics. There's a lot of similarity. So what the example that we just did is a debate about comparing things, right? And there are many different debates about comparing things. And in every debate about comparing things, you need to provide a standard, right? So these are debates about trade-offs. So you provide a standard to determine benefits. Okay. So how do I determine more important than? How do I measure more important than? Right. So I measure more important based on how long the benefits last. Right. So I think the one that has longer benefits is more important. Or I measure more important based on the scale of the impact. How many people benefit? The one that benefits more people is more important than something else. That's how I measure more important. Okay. In a different kind of debate, say a debate about banning or regulation, then one side wants to that's a debate about addressing some kind of social harm, right? So one side believes that social harm can be controlled, so you want to regulate. Another side believes that social harm cannot be controlled, so you want to ban it. Okay, but again, that is a pattern that will occur across many different debates, right? So banning smoking, banning drugs, banning guns, banning, I don't know, uniforms, banning something different, and the other side says, no, let's regulate. Let's regulate smoking, let's regulate guns, let's regulate, poaching, let's regulate something else, right? So that is another pattern, and the way you build that case will be similar regardless of the topic, because all those topics are about banning versus regulation. Does that make sense? Do you guys have any questions about case construction? This is a very kind of simple, superficial approach to it. It works better, I think, if you have a specific thing you're looking for. So how do you build a case about something something specifically?
Can we talk a bit more about the stakeholders thing? How can we include aspects that are concerned with different stakeholders regarding an issue, and then how can that thing actually help us to come up with arguments?
Okay, all right, good. So you use, I'm trying to find a way to put this. Okay, so when I'm trying to build a case, or trying to build an argument, that case or argument needs to be useful for something, right? It can't just be an argument for the sake of an argument, like maybe what we debaters like to do sometimes. The argument needs to have an impact, right? So it needs to be important for something, for someone, for some specific reason. The more relevant you can make that argument, the more powerful you can push the argument, then the more likely that argument is going to work. The harder it is to deny that argument. Okay, so not only do you need to argue why this idea is important, you argue why the idea is important, and that's based on who that idea affects. Okay, so you do this in debates a lot. When you see people talking about children, right? Everybody wants to protect children. If something harms children a lot, then that argument becomes very powerful, right? So I protect the education of children. Any kind of policy that I run, I think about how this can harm the children. I need to ban smoking because children will get affected, and society prioritizes values. It's very careful about children, right? So in real life, also you'll see politicians, you see advocates, everybody. It's a very emotive thing that people can rally around talking about the children. So you think about which argument your stakeholder impacts, and then argue why that stakeholder is really, really important. Okay, so the first thing is to connect it to a stakeholder. So which is the group of people that are impacted. But then also the second thing is divide and get into the details of your stakeholder. When people talk about children or talk about society, it's not all the same, right? I can't say, society will benefit from this. Yeah, but which part of society? Because society is composed of many different individuals. Right? You have, in society, you have children. They're a subset of society. You have adults. You have young people, old people. You have government officials. You have soldiers. You have women as a subset. You have ethnic minority as another subset. So how did these groups impact or get impacted differently by a policy, right? And you want to be as specific as possible, because the more specific you are, the more likely you are true, more likely that your argument is true, and more likely that you are correct, right? So if I say my policy is going to impact a group, I need to, as much as possible, explain which group this is and how this group is affected by this policy, right? And then the last thing is talk about why that group within that larger group is really important. Is really important to this debate, is really important to our society, and then use that to kind of emphasize and strengthen your case. So at the end, sometimes part of the debate will come down to who is doing more for children. Right? Which one of these sites are helping children more? But not just children. Which one of the sites are helping children with learning disabilities more? Or which one of these sites are helping children who don't have resources to help themselves? Right? So you split around that stakeholder and try to get more and more and more specific within the debate, to show why your case or your arguments help a specific group more than it helps another group. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks, Logan. We have another question now.
Sure.
In many cases, since we're doing it in the British parliamentary format,
Yep.
We also need to claim, even it goes to one of the sides, there's always an opening and closing side. So for the closing side to get an advantage, not violating any laws or not violating the system, how are we supposed to knife the first team and still get away with it?
How are you supposed to knife the first team and get away with it? That's asking like, how do you mug someone, right, and not get caught? I don't want to encourage you to get into a life of crime. Then I have to pay for that in a different sense. Okay, look, you're not supposed to knife the other team, and there are many ways in which you can get an advantage without having to knife them. So I'll do two things. Okay, one, I'm going to talk about what is the role of the closing team, how you can extend and be unique and original without necessarily knifing. And second, I will talk about in some situations when maybe you absolutely need to maybe knife the other side or your opening team, how you can do that and get away with it. Okay, but I don't want you to do that all the time. The problem with doing this is sometimes you tell someone how to do something and then that's the thing that they do all the time. Okay, once you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail, and then you just hammer everything, which you really don't need to do. So the first thing, so I'm in closing government or closing opposition. What is my role and how I can extend it? The first thing you should understand is teams, judges look for something different from closing, right? Everybody accepts the fact that you're not an opening team. The opening teams had half an hour to talk about whatever they wanted to talk about, right? So if I don't come up with the unique argument, the first argument, the big clear things in the debate, is not really my fault, okay? Because the other team already did, right? So my role is not to come up with the most obvious arguments, is not to be argumentation heavy, right? Because you just can't, right? It's like asking your opening team to break the deadlocks in the debate or to do a summary of the debate. They can't do that because the debate hasn't ended, right? So it's impossible for the closing teams to do that. Don't expect yourself to do that, okay? Because you're thinking like an opening team when you're in closing. You're thinking, I need to have 3 arguments, each person I need to develop. No, you don't need to do those things, right? What you need to do, what people expect in closing, is for you to carry forward the analysis of the debate, to make the debate easier to understand, to provide frameworks or to provide a way to compare, to find the ideas and the arguments in the debate, right? To impact arguments. So if the opening side has already developed these arguments, what other arguments maybe could come in to make these arguments stronger, right? So stakeholder analysis is actually a good tool that you can use in closing. If you focus the debate onto specific stakeholders in society, the opening team talked about the problems, the harms and benefits, or the crime, punishment thing in general. In closing, you're going to focus on specific stakeholders and how these stakeholders will far suffer more because of the policy or benefit more because of the policy. So you impact the policies a lot more. You make the opening arguments stronger, right? You win them. Not stronger in the sense that I just repeat them and I say why they're good, but I provide analysis that justifies those arguments. I provide analysis that carries those arguments through, right? And that so without that kind of analysis, those arguments may not have won the debate, or the arguments may not make sense. So you are using their arguments, but they are also kind of depending on you, right? So that's one thing closing teams can do, to bring forward the debate. The other thing closing teams can do is to explore unexplored or less explored areas of the debate to find a different perspective. Different but still relevant, right? So you talked largely about the first world. I'm going to extend second into the developing world a little bit, right? You talked about the social harms. I will talk about the economic harms. You talked about the the security or the environmental issues. I'm going to talk about the gender issues or something like that in the debate. But these other areas that you focus on are always going to be secondary areas, right? Because if they are the primary areas, then you are changing the entire focus of the debate, right? Unless the opening team has missed these areas, and then you can bring those areas in, right? So from closing. Don't try to be too different, because the danger of being too different is that you're not relevant anymore, right? Then you are doing a different debate, okay? Because in closing you're like a sequel. Your opening is Batman 1, and then in closing you are Batman 2. Batman 2 must still be the same storyline a little bit as Batman 1, but maybe better with slightly more special effects, deepens the characters, explains some of the mysteries that occurred in Batman 1, and then you come out watching Batman 2 going, yeah, now I understand it more, and I'm really looking forward to Batman 3. But because of it joined all the dots in Batman 1, right? And it's carried it further, deeper into the story. That's great part about Batman 2. Yeah, there's a new villain, it's a new different character here, right? It's a new slightly different twist, but it's still Batman. But if you change the story, now suddenly Batman's wearing red underwear, right? And Batman can fly, and it's completely different. Then this is not Batman anymore, right? It's Superman. And then you're like, closing was very, very different, and yeah, it's different, but it's not Batman anymore. I'm disappointed because I was expecting a continuation of Batman. Okay, so don't try to completely change the story. You still need to carry through the same story, right? And that's the challenge of closing. That's the difficult job that closing needs to do, and closing gets rewarded when closing does that job properly, right? So that's the first thing. Don't always try to completely change the story, right? Batman must be Batman. The second thing is what happens when your opening team is not Batman. When you're supposed to be Batman, but opening team runs the Incredible Hulk, and then what do you do? Okay, do you still continue Batman, or do you change and become the Incredible Hulk? Now, if the debate is debatable, and if you feel like I can continue, I can extend something. Yes, this was not what I prepared for, but I have half an hour extra to think about things that are going in the debate, and I can continue. Then my advice to you is to continue it, right? If the motion is about organ donation, and they're supposed to do organ donation, but they didn't do organ donation, they did nuclear weapons instead, right? So that's a big change, but I'm going to continue anyway. I don't want to challenge the definition. I don't want to change it. I'm just going to continue, right? So the judges will reward and recognize the fact that closing is trying to continue the debate. Good judges will, because that's what they're supposed to do. I think the only time you want to kind of change or move away is when something your opening team does is indefensible, right? So their proposal is crazy, the proposal is too hard, or it's truistic, or it's offensive, or something's harmful, and you want to move away from it, right? Now, you can't change the proposal as and whenever you want, right? Changing the proposal is knifing, is dumping your opening team. Now remember, you are part of a coalition. You are the minority coalition party in your major coalition. If you change the bill, the law that the party is trying to pass, you are basically saying, I don't want to be part of this coalition anymore, right? I am breaking away from this coalition. Now that makes it easy actually for me to dump you, right? If you do this in closing gov, and then closing op has an opportunity to cut you out of the debate, right? Closing op will say that, no, you can't do that. You need to still defend your opening team, right? So you're contradicting, you're knifing, you're gone, you're forth. right? So you don't change the bill as much as possible. That has to be a very, very last resort. Okay, if you change the bill, you're saying that this bill is indefensible. Nobody can defend this bill, right? Not that it is hard to defend, right? Not that I think it's challenging to defend. It's indefensible. Okay, cannot defend this bill. Right? So unless it's that, don't knife, don't move away. Now, if your opening team is doing something you think is incredibly hard to defend, and or you just don't want to defend, right? So they have a very far-reaching policy. Let's say they want to talk about the death penalty, and they want to give the death penalty to like many, many, many different types of people, right? So not just murderers, not just rapists. They think people who commit like assault should get the death penalty. People who like insult religion should get the death penalty. People who do all kinds of crazy things should get a death penalty. These are very trigger-happy guys, right? So you are happy defending the death penalty, but you don't want to defend the death penalty for that wide range of individuals. Okay. Now, there are two ways you can sort of move away from your opening team. If the other teams in the debate have already kind of dropped the team, let's say opening oppositions challenge them, there's a lot of points of information coming through. You look at your judges, and the judges are like, oh, I don't think. So if it's very clear, then you can just make a statement and you can go like, it doesn't happen very often, but in this case, I think we're going to break the coalition, and closing government is not going to support opening government in this debate, right? Unfortunately, we tried very hard to do it, but I don't think it's possible. And if we had punished, then so be it. But it's just not. We cannot consciously, conscionably, be true to my conscience and defend what the opening government team is saying. Okay, so we're going to move away from that. Right? That happens in the minority of situations. Most of the time, if they say something you don't think you can defend, you just don't focus on it. Right? You emphasize on the things that you can defend. Okay, so if my opening government team is talking about the death penalty for murderers, rapists, people who insult religion, people who destroy the environment, I'm not going to defend death penalty that broadly, but I will defend the things which I think they spoke about that is defensible. Okay, and I will try to portray it in a positive sense, right? I'll say this is what they meant, this is why I think should be focused on, and then I will attack the other guys on the other side for trying to move away from the debate. So if they ask me something and say, well, what do you think about death penalty for people who insult religion? I'll say, look, hold on, that's not the focus of the debate. You still need to tell me why death penalty for this thing is not acceptable. Right? So I try to bring the debate to where I think it's important, and basically I don't try to disagree with them, but I shift my focus and focus on the things which I think are the most important in the debate and try to create some clash and contention. Okay, so that I think is the really the only way you can quote unquote knife your opening team, and that's by not prioritizing on the things that they prioritize, right? Prioritize on other things. A lot of closing teams try to do this to shift the priority, right? They say, well, the most important thing in this debate is this, and that this is something that the opening team didn't talk about, right, or didn't focus on. And then why we need to focus on this, why this is the most important thing, and closing is the only team in this debate that has done this. Okay, that's something that you can do in closing. But remember, your biggest goal in closing is not really to beat your opening team, right? You want to take the bench forward. So take out the other two teams on the other side, and then you're guaranteed either first or second. Okay, and if you're guaranteed first or second, there's still a winning position for you. Right, you get either third or second, 3 or 2 points, 2 or 3 points, and then you will move forward in the debate from there. Trying to go for the win all the time, and risking things like knifing your opening team to get a win could result in you getting a fourth. So it's too high risk of a strategy. You only do it when you're absolutely sure that it's going to lead to a positive outcome. If I support the opening team, I could get third or fourth. So if I knife them, I could get second or third, right? So I think the odds are better, second or third versus third or fourth. So I'm going to knife them. Don't try to knife them to get a first. If you think, all right, they've done really, really well, if I support them well and I extend their arguments, I can get second, then go, get second. Okay, you may come out with a first instead of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
yeah? Okay.
Do we have any more questions? I guess we can take one question only now.
I have a question.
Sure.
So suppose here, like, you have two big arguments, like the economy versus environment. Okay, so we're comparing arguments. Each side presents their points. Like, what is the the ground on which they base their points? Like, how do they compare it? Is there like a bar or something that we can weigh it upon? Like,
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? So, especially in debates that compare, you need to provide a standard. You need to provide a measurement tool to determine why your side is doing more than the other side. Okay, so for example, in a debate that says like, okay, we will ban smoking in or government buildings or something, you have a goal from that debate, right? You'd say that we're doing this because there's a problem. So if this thing solves the problem, then we win. If we don't solve the problem, then we lose, right? So your standard is whether or not you solve the problem, and also then maybe what you're going to trade off in order to solve the problem, right? So if I solve the problem but I cause more harm to other people, if I damage the industry, if I do some kind of huge loss to society, then maybe it's not worth solving the problem. If I have to give up personal liberties and freedom, blah blah blah, right? So that's the kind of trade-offs, and to determine whether or not you win the debate, right? So that's a little bit more straightforward. So I mean, even in those debates, you keep that in mind. So how if I'm trying to make this argument, does this argument solve the problem? What are the costs of this argument solving the problem? Is it still beneficial if we solve the problem this way? In debates where you're comparing two things, like the argument, like the environment more important than the economy, like we should prioritize this over that or something, then you need to provide your own standard. Right? So you need to say, what do we mean by more important, and how do we measure more important? Okay, so that's where your setup and your context come into play, right? So if I was going to approach this, I will try to find firstly that setup. So if we are in Nepal, I'd say like, okay, so this is a debate about Nepal and how we move forward, and we have 2 or 3 criteria, right? So we think the side that wins is the side that can show you which policy benefits the most number of citizens of Nepal, right? The most number of people. That's the first criteria. Second criteria is which policy is good for the long term. So not just in the short term, but in the long term, right? So which policy will help us for generations to come? That's going to be our long term. And thirdly, is which policy is more feasible? Which policy is strategically more practical, which we can put into play quicker? Okay, so those are going to be my 3 criteria. Then I use those 3 criteria to defend my side. Now, obviously, I've chosen the criteria that helps me, okay, but I can't be too selfish with this criteria. If I'm too self-serving, then the judges won't buy the criteria, the other side won't buy the criteria, right? So if I'm defending the environment, I can't choose criteria and say that the winning team is the team that is more environmentally conscious. The other side's not going to buy that, okay? And then they say like the winning team is a team that's more economically sustainable or viable. That's not going to work. But if I choose criteria like which policy benefits the most number of people, which policy is most sustainable, which policy is most practical or immediately feasible, then that's criteria I can apply to both sides, right? Then I use that criteria to break my arguments, or not to break my arguments, but to carry my arguments through, right? So I make an argument, I talk about the economy, and I say, Nepal is well positioned to exploit our environmental advantage. We are the only country that has this in terms of environment. So then this is how this can help us get an advantage. And this advantage is sustainable in the long term. this advantage can help the most number of people. This is something we can do immediately. We don't need outside investment. We don't need to develop something else. We don't need aid, blah, blah, blah. We can do this. So based on this criteria, you can do this. Right? Or use the criteria towards the end in your whip speech or in the reply speech and say like, okay, so these are the criteria that we need to employ in the debate that my first speaker gave you. So based on this criteria, why is our perspective or our paradigm the right one in this debate? Because we have this and this and this. Yeah, so you need to provide some kind of standard. You need to ask yourself which team is the team that has shown you this and which team is the team that has shown you that. Who are we helping? And why is this group more important than that group? Why is this argument more important than the other argument? A lot of debating comes down to meta debating or debating about debating, right? Arguing about arguments. So you don't just make an obvious, well, not an obvious, but a first level argument. The first level argument is to prove your topic. Okay, so this argument connected to my topic. The second level argument is the argument about the argument. Why is this argument more important than the other argument? Right? And that's one way you can break deadlocks, or one way you can emphasize your team over the other side. A good way to see how people do this is by either watching debate videos, right, and trying to see how to break those deadlocks, or by judging debates. So when you judge debates, you need to find a standard to separate or to divide the debate, right? Because you'll have two teams, both who insist that they are right, but you need to find some way to separate them, right? And in order to separate them, you usually need to find some kind of commonality that they both agree. So both these teams agree that they want to help children between the ages of 5 and 10, and they want to help these children improve their math. That is what both of these teams agree. So, given that they both agree on this, which side best showed how they can achieve this, right? And how do we measure achievement? Based on the standard that they proposed, based on this.
Okay, Logan, thank you so much for your very valuable time. We know that you're very busy, and you've been watching the development in Nepali debate movement very closely, I know, and I thank you so much once again.
No problem, guys. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to do this. I hope it was helpful. Good luck with, good luck with changing the world.
Thanks, Logan. Bye.
Bye.